I want to start this off by saying that the X-Men were the only Marvel superhero team I ever gave a damn about. I'm not just talking about the excellent two main animated series. I don't just mean the movies they made that I loved so much. No. I'm talking about the comics. And I was introduced to them in three ways. The Dark Phoenix saga, that famous operatic story about Jean Grey going mad with cosmic power. Days of Future Past, about Kitty Pryde's mind being sent back in time into her younger self to warn the X-Men about a threat in the future caused by the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants that will end with mutant kind being rounded up and put into camps. And the new X-Men run by Grant Morrison that took the X-Men into a bold new dawn as Charles Xavier openly admitted he was a mutant, basically outing himself to the whole world and making the X-Men more public and in the public perception and bigger than ever before. Now, at the core of the Dark Phoenix saga, all of them, what's there is the story of the X-Men's humanity. Jean struggling not to give in to the dark side, slipping more and more into questionable actions until the dam breaks and she becomes Dark Phoenix. The X-Men trying to keep a dark future from unfolding at the hands of people who don't recognize them as human, and a tragedy caused by those who see themselves as superior to humans. There's the depiction of mutant kind as youth from Grant Morrison as your children who need respect and love, and while a steady hand at times, sure, also need room to spread their wings and to make their own choices, the most human and understandable desire of all. New X-Men had tales of teen pregnancy, wanting to be seen as more than a loser, struggling with identity and drugs and peer pressure. They were damn good stories. I love them dearly. And, for the record, Nightcrawler. That's my favorite. I know everybody adores Wolverine a ton, and he is awesome, and he's a lot cooler than Cyclops, but let's be honest, everybody always picks Wolverine for their favorite. Nightcrawler, though, he's mine. Plus, as a fellow Catholic, I can relate. Heck, even Chuck Austin's run had some good things in it. I personally like the whole Xavier and Juggernaut finally get over their issues take, and the stuff with Nurse Annie, but what he really did right was Sammy Parr. He, like Barnell Bohusk, the Beak, wasn't just an easy-to-understand mutant allegory, who could easily stand in for the whole, "Oh my god, the X-Men, you're so cool!" part of the fandom. He wasn't just the common put-upon child who would eventually stand up for himself and be proud of what he was, without going too far into the Quentin Quire riot at Xavier direction. No. Sammy really worked as the audience surrogate. He was the outsider looking in, who then got brought into the fold. Utterly new to the X-Men, never seen what they'd done before, only heard about what they could do. He even ends up helping them out, and at the same time, connecting to them, especially to Juggernaut, and he's able to soften the guy's edges. Because he was that audience surrogate, because of who he was, we, the readers, could connect and relate to him. After all, he didn't have much in terms of powers. Sure, he can breathe underwater and talk underwater, and he looks like a fish while being a good swimmer, but let's be honest, being able to breathe for long periods underwater and being a good swimmer, that's something the average person can get good at. So, he was a good representative of the average kid. You could easily be Sammy Parr. That's what worked about him. He's like Titus from Final Fantasy X, but less whiny. Or Frank Grimes, but less grouchy and bitter. Or, hey, Jubilee from the animated series when that first started. So, there was a lot to love about the X-Men. Recently, they'd not been doing so well after Morrison's run, so somebody had to right the boat. Enter Johnathan Hickman, who took that boat and crashed it into the nearest iceberg while claiming it was actually a brilliant swerve you never saw coming. And I admit, I didn't see it coming, because I didn't think he was stupid enough to do something so mind-numbingly dumb. So let me go over, one after the other, the problems I have with the current state of affairs. Let's take a look at some of the very questionable actions our heroes have taken. 1. They refuse to let any mutant criminal be held liable for any actions taken and think they're above man's laws. Only they get to pass judgment. 2. Krakoa is literally located in huge major nations, like one part in every single nation, and it can only be accessed by mutants, therefore intruding on other nations' sovereign land. And it's now begun moving into other planes of existence and other dimensions, so it's spreading out everywhere. A territorial invader. The island that walks is now seeing everything. 3. If any nation or group even thinks about trying to create any kind of countermeasure to the mutants at all, should any, say X-Force decide, you know what, I think we should get rid of this world leader, and they're willing to do that, the X-Men can immediately send endlessly resurrectable mutants to destroy it. With the 5 special X-Men that have been selected, they can now endlessly revive and resurrect people by creating brand new bodies for them and using Cerebro to pop their minds back into the bodies, because Cerebro creates copies of the mind. It's as if they never died at all. There are no stakes to death anymore. There's no threat of death, no sense of this could be the last time we come back. No stakes. And I know some of you are going to argue, well, death in comic books is always cheap. But even then, there's always that faint illusion, that sense of maybe, just maybe, this time someone's going to be dead for years to come. There's always been that faint possibility in the X-Men. Now, not so much. I mean, Jean Grey's died a bunch of times. Colossus was dead for 5 years. Nightcrawler, 2-3 years? So, it was there before. Maybe not as openly brazen as it is now, but there was some stakes. There isn't any more. Number 4. Emma Frost has psychically screwed around with United Nations members to keep them from keeping Krakoa from becoming a nation. So now our heroes have brainwashed people. 5. They're letting mutant criminals in to Krakoa and basically offering mass murderers and psychopaths asylum. And as if that wasn't bad enough, they're letting several of these monsters onto their ruling council. People like Mr. Freaking Sinister, Sebastian Shaw, motherfucking Apocalypse. Do I have to explain why a guy named Apocalypse should not be on your ruling council? Hello? Mr. Megalomaniacal genocidal dictator ran incredibly oppressive regimes in ancient times, responsible for hundreds of thousands if not millions of deaths, had a literal age of apocalypse that reduced the earth to a barren wasteland. That was so bad that Onslaught himself, the most pro-mutant monster in the world, born from Xavier and Magneto's worst selves combined, was so horrified of learning about it when he scanned Nate Gray's mind, he decided, you know what, mutants are just as awful as humans. You all deserve to die. Remember that? And you let Apocalypse help decide how things are going to be run on your island paradise. Apocalypse. And you know what? They're hypocrites, too. Number 6. When Sabretooth gets judged to be guilty of murdering humans, one of the major laws for Krakoa they made up on the spot, he gets exiled deep into Krakoa. Okay. The other X-Men, like Wolverine, killed a bunch of scientists and the like just a few hours ago on a space mission to stop Orcus, a human extremist group. Why do they get a free pass if no killing humans is a rule worthy of being exiled? He doesn't even get a talking to. Do something! Number 7. No humans are even remotely allowed on Krakoa. Great, we got isolationism. Wonderful idea. Because that always works out, right? 8. They're saying stuff like, you have new gods now, with the gods being mutant themselves, or going, we are the inheritors of the earth. That is, when they're not outright calling humanity a conquered people, or man should know when he is beaten, he should know how to break and run, or surrender and ask for unearned mercy. This is supervillain talk. Plain and simple. And finally, number 9, Moira. Oh, Moira. Let me explain. Moira McTaggart was done dirty. Real damn dirty. She was a great representative of humanity. She was compassionate, intelligent, and a good human ally that showed there were humans that believed in the X-Men and Charles's vision. She was an example of tolerance and acceptance and coexistence. All of that was destroyed by Johnathan Hickman, who turned her into a mutant who can resurrect and be reborn in new lives and remembers everything from her previous lives. By doing this, you've literally turned it into us versus them. It's symptomatic of the big problem. The nihilistic idea that, no, mutants and humans can never get along. Toss that idea into the trash. I don't care about the humans in this story because they're never going to improve, apparently. And I don't care about the mutants because they're not interested in coexistence anymore. If neither side actually wants there to be real peace, then to quote Alice from Through the Looking Glass, well, they were both very unpleasant characters. Now, why do I say humans never seem to want peace? Here's the problem. The entire series so far under Hickman has established some big, major rules. Humans and mutants always end up fighting because in some way or another, humans will make machines. The machines and or humans will come looking for the mutants. They will fight, and mutants will eventually lose. Always. Even if the mutants try to scurry to a corner to be left alone, humanity will come seeking a fight. After all, Xavier and Moira tried to build some kind of nation of their own in Moira's fifth life, a city only for mutants. And the humans came anyway to pick a fight. It seems a constant. That's the problem. That's why I say this run is nihilistic. The mutants will always lose because the humans are always going to end up coming to wipe them out with machines or the like. So there's literally no point at all. Mutants can't ever win, and humans are always going to try to genocide them, and it's severely screwed up. So if you can't fight humanity and win, and you can't conquer them, and you can't live in peace with them, and they'll inevitably come looking for a fight, so you can't be isolationist, so what's left? Leaving the planet? And getting a world entirely of your own? I mean, good God! Grant Morrison started out his run with a genocide of mutants, and even those first few issues didn't feel this depressing at the end. I mean, he got it out of the way in the first 3 books of his run. Johnathan Hickman's been a punch in the gut issue after issue. And I know there's going to be people who say, I'm being too hard on the X-Men. But I'm really not, especially when the blatant nonsense they pull for blaming humanity for things like this comes around. First things first. Scarlet Witch. She wasn't a human when the decimation happened. She was a mutant. The nonsensical retcon of her not being Magneto's kid, along with Quicksilver, was a bad retcon. And even now, currently, in the comics, she's not actually a human. She's a mutate. A genetically altered being, courtesy of the being known as the High Evolutionary. So she's not a human. And I know what you're going to say. Well, why do mutates not count as human? Simple. Because if a literal single gene within a human body turning on inside you is enough to make you not be counted as human, but as a mutant, then being genetically altered and changed makes you no longer a real human either. So she's not a human, and blaming humanity for what she did is basically a load of crap. Then, of course, we can't forget the whole Bolivar Trask gets blamed for all Sentinels thing. Also pretty much bullcrap. I mean, for one, Trask died trying to stop the first Master Mold. He destroyed it. And on top of that, when it came to Genosha and those Sentinels, it wasn't a human that did that. It was Xavier's twin sister, Cassandra Nova. She's a Mummeradai, basically like an evil spirit given flesh. She's not a human. Now, you could argue the Sentinels that she used were still abandoned leftovers from the government, the U.S. government, so we should blame them for creating those Sentinels, even if they'd been tossed away and discarded and decommissioned. But here's the thing. You might ask, wait a minute, why was the U.S. government making Sentinels at all? Who started that? Well, Funny story. It first started when Sebastian Shaw suggests to Senator Kelly, what might be a good idea to stomp down on mutant crime? Sentinels. And he further encourages that idea and helps to fund the Sentinel program after the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants try to kill Senator Kelly. So after they try to kill the senator, it gets the government spooked, and then they get encouraged and funded to create Sentinels courtesy of the Hellfire Club led by Sebastian Shaw. And Sebastian Shaw isn't a human. That sexual assaulting scumbag is a mutant. On top of that, if the Brotherhood had never attacked Senator Kelly, the mutants never would have been brought back into production. Or at least they wouldn't have been made and then discarded and left to be used by a psychotic evil twin of Professor Xavier. And some of you might go, well, she still used Donald Trask to get the Sentinels to do what she wanted, so that's technically humanity's fault. Well, see, she lied to Donald, manipulated him, and was the actual mastermind behind Genosha. She told a dentist that she was a government agent, that he was needed on a matter of utmost national importance, and that he had to do black ops work on the president. So it really was her fault, not Donald's. He was just a schmuck, manipulated into doing her dirty work. On top of that, he would have been killed if he hadn't done what she asked. The Sentinels were about to wipe him out until he spoke up. And some of you might also go, well, even if it wasn't really humanity's fault that the Genosian attack happened, S.H.I.E.L.D. or the Avengers should have stopped Genosha from happening. Xavier says as much. Humanity is complicit at best in this sort of thing. Here's why that's not fair either, and I want you to pay close attention to this. Nobody saw it coming. The attack took place and occurred in mere minutes, and Genosha's all the way over in East Africa off the coast. It takes a day to get there by plane from the United States of America. So by the time help could even begin to arrive, everybody would already be dead. The Avengers couldn't get there in time. S.H.I.E.L.D. couldn't get there in time. Even Tony Stark couldn't. His armor goes up to Mach 8. I looked this up. That's 5,600 miles per hour. Here's the problem. Africa's east coast is about 8,766 miles away. So even if Tony went as fast as he could, it would have been too late. Everyone would be dead. Thor? How about Thor? Well, he was too injured at the time. He'd just been in a war with the Dark Gods, so he couldn't go over there. Spider-Man? He doesn't have a jet, does he? So blaming humans and going, they're complicit, really is a bad argument, and has been for years. On top of that, here's the big problem. Treating mutants like an oppressed minority doesn't work when we're talking about people who can literally shake planets. Do you know how Magneto got the nation of Genosha to begin with? He blackmailed the United Nations. He seized control of the planet's magnetosphere from the North Magnetic Pole and was blackmailing the world into creating a mutant nation. So the UN had no choice but to cede the island nation of Genosha to him because he was threatening to shake the world like a snow globe. Who's really doing the oppressing here? And let's look at the breakdown of all the deaths based on who's left. So now that I've pretty firmly established you can blame Cassandra Nova for Genosha, and I've pretty firmly explained why Scarlet Witch isn't a human, so it's not fair to blame humanity for what she did. And on top of that, she didn't kill that many people, she depowered them. That doesn't mean they're dead. So that leaves 1,463 deaths at the hands of humans if you add up all the times humans directly caused mutant deaths. That sounds pretty awful, right? Except Zorn, X-Man, who was disguised as Magneto, killed 5,000 in New York City in one day alone. Nate Gray, when he went insane, was killing thousands, if not tens of thousands, in the name of trying to save the future and the Earth from people ruining it in the here and now. We can't forget Mr. Sinister and his marauders slaughtered the Morlocks. And Sublime, a sentient mold slime thing, he was the one behind the monstrous anti-mutant genocidal camp known as Neverland Ranch. And that's before I even get into stuff like the Ultimate X-Men. Magneto flooded the East Coast and caused the death of every single man, woman, and child in Latveria by freezing it over. He killed tens of millions of people. And I know some of you might argue, come on, you can't invoke alternate realities and the like. But the mainline comic that Hickman is writing is invoking alternate realities and timelines. So if you're going to do that, I think it's kind of fair to invoke the bad stuff that people like Magneto or crazed X-Men do in other timelines as well. Mutants are not innocent little babes. They're not poor little lambs who never did anything wrong. Oh, it's so unfair how they're treated! Except, it's not. Not when you actually look at it. To paraphrase a well-written Tumblr post I read and loved from DavidMan95, the X-Men are pretty crappy representations of oppressed minorities. I mean, look at them. They look like movie stars. Their clothing's hot and awesome. They wear the fashion of action heroes. They get to lounge about a mansion whenever they feel like, and there's an always willing teacher ready to listen, a huge circle of friends with powers just like them in the exact same boat. And what are they really? Perfect men and women punching people uglier than themselves and beating up a Holocaust survivor that bends metal every other year. And when they're not ruminating on whether mutant violence is the real problem, which in the context of the world built around them, it actually has basically been for at least a decade or so, do you see the problem? And to boot, when bigots claim they're dangerous to normal humans to drive their racism allegory home, the bigots are unquestionably right because mutants are mind-shatteringly powerful and dangerous on a planetary and often galactic scale, with about half of their most prominent public figures pledging to exterminate the entirety of humanity as a species on live television and nearly pulling it off. And some of you might be saying, well, what do you want? The X-Men are never going to be fully accepted by the Marvel Universe, so what is it you want? The very premise of the X-Men comic is based off something that was never going to last. Even minorities here in the United States of America have representation in Congress, or they got to become mayors, governors, even president at one point. There's huge lobbying groups that advocate for gay rights and for black rights and for the rights of women. There's celebrities who are minorities that are beloved the world over. There's not really anything like that in the X-Men world. I mean, we did have mutant celebrities in X-Static, and then they all died in the mid-2000s. I mean, they came back for a one-shot, and that's basically it. So, just a couple mutant celebrities whose antics don't even really tie into the main book and don't even get really mentioned outside of it. That's not good enough. So if you want to try and say the X-Men comics are supposed to be a reflection to some degree of real life, give us these things. Give us a mutant president and several mutant senators and mayors and governors. Have them become a protected class under U.S. law. Have there be mutant lobbying groups, the NAAMP, National Association for the Advancement of Mutant People. Have big, huge, active mutant celebrities that people adore. And some bigots can point at them and go, why can't you mutants be more like this successful mutant who could easily pass for normal? It would be more on the nose, sure, but it's more accurate to real life and how bigots act. But Hickman's not going to do that. Doesn't look like he's going to do that at all. So if he's not going to do that, then Mr. Hickman, do what Morrison did with Barnell Bohusk. Do what Days of Future Past did with Kitty. Do what Austin did with Sammy. Have there be an audience surrogate who can look in on all this and act the way the audience would, or at least have someone openly questioning whether all of this is okay. Don't have all the mutants just be a monolith that are just unquestionably just fine with acting more like the Inhumans than the X-Men. Because nobody likes the Inhumans. Although, let's be honest, I doubt Johnathan Hickman or anyone at Marvel is going to see this or even care. Because when he was outright asked, what do you think about the people who say that the X-Men are bad guys now, he gave a non-answer that said a lot without saying anything at all. But hey, you know, maybe I'm misreading it somehow. Maybe I'm misjudging Hickman. Maybe he does have a legitimately good plan. Maybe I'm reading into this stuff that's not there. Maybe I'm being unfair. I mean, let's look at another interview that was done with another one of the writers under the current X-Men brand in regards to how things are supposed to go. What did they have to say about X-Force, who are basically cleared to do like Black Ops missions and are the CIA for mutants? Oh, this is good. They actually outright asked, is it okay to... Are there not going to be like team disagreements and stuff like that? X-Force seems like a pragmatic solution to a difficult problem. Foes that don't play by the same rules. But how close can this team edge that line in the Dawn of X era when there's already warning signs that some of the mutants may not be as altruistic as they seem? And you know what? They're right. The idea that all mutants can be trusted isn't just naive, it's flat out wrong and stupid. So what does the writer of X-Force say? We just built this thing. We're not looking to break it. The mutants are aligned. This is a long game we're playing. We got a lot of rope. Yes, there will be friction, disagreements, distrust. Yes, some of our characters are going to do bad things, but sometimes for good reason. But as House of X and Powers of X made clear, humans and AI are the enemy. Humans and AI are the enemy. You've just tossed all of humanity under the bus. I can't... You know what? I can't even... What do you all think? You can feel free to discuss it in the comments. I can't support these guys anymore. I'm not going to buy any more of the comics. I'm going to read recaps. I'm going to read reviews. I'm not going to buy any more. I want it to get better, but it doesn't look like it's going to. I can't think of anything I like from Hickman's run right now. I had such high hopes for it, and now it's gone. But, okay, you know what? There is one thing. There's one thing I really do actually like. Nimrod. The robot just looks really cool now. Like, amazing. I love what they're doing with him. If it turns out the solution is to, like, maybe to keep the Sentinels themselves from being used, like doing a face heel turn for them and having them become allies instead of eternal enemies, that would be nice. Having the machines be the one to recognize mutants' humanity would be ironic indeed, and it would be nice to see this cool guy as an ally, or at the very least not an outright villain anymore. I really like him. Anyway, take care of yourself. Go ahead, let the discussion go wild, and I hope things get better for the X-Men, because right now, it stinks.